Hello, and welcome to our webinar at Perceptive Software, looking at ECM and VNA and building a foundation for data liquidity. My name is John Hamdorf. I'm the Healthcare Solution Manager at Perceptive Software, and I'll be emceeing the event as well as introducing myself and the other participants in our webinar. So to start off with me is Shannon Werb. He is Chief Strategy Officer of Acuo Technologies, which is part of Perceptive Software now. And also with us today will be Phil Wasson, the President and CEO of TriRivers Health System, who is a luminary within the field of health IT. Just for your information, if you do have questions, we're going to hold those off till the end. You should have a questions function on your WebEx on the right-hand side, or the GoToMeeting on the right-hand side. Type your questions in there, and we'll try to get to them at the end. If we do run out of time, we will take time to respond back after the webinar to answer any questions you may have. So with that, let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is just define some of these terms we're talking about with ECM, VNA, data liquidity, because for some of you they may be new terms. So the first piece, ECM, acronym for Enterprise Content Management. Traditionally this has been capturing, storing, and access documents, unstructured content, we would sometimes call it, information that resides outside of the EMR. Whether it be in document form, fax form, photo form. It's just information that kind of resides outside of that core system. The second acronym is VNA, stands for Vendor Neutral Archive. We're going to go into this in great detail, so I don't want to take away too much of Shannon and Phil's thunder up front, but we're really going to discuss how that technology works into an overall content strategy and what the difference is between an independent VNA and a non-independent VNA. Interoperability. We're going to touch on this a few times as well. Just wanted to define interoperability as the ability to share information between systems. So once again, we're talking about some of the third certification programs like through IHE, for profiles, actors, and agents to share information between disparate systems, whether they're internally or externally. It's a standard-based architecture through XDS. And finally, the concept of data liquidity, which is in the title of our webinar. And really what data liquidity is, it builds off the functionality of interoperability. It's the value statement that comes from being able to share information. So it's delivering that useful, relevant data to the stakeholders, the users, and the applications to make those critical business and clinical decisions. Moving forward, we're going to touch a little bit on the challenges in healthcare and how our healthcare strategy aligns with those challenges. The challenges in healthcare are many indeed. There's policy challenges, economic challenges, there's workforce challenges, but really we tried to break those up into three different organizational groups. The first of being content challenges. The fact of the matter is content is growing, both in size and in quantity. Clinical imaging is moving to new departments and becoming more complex, 3D, 4D imaging. The new departments are creating not only clinical imaging, but also non-DICOM content in the form of documents, notes, that supplement all those images. How about genomics and the move to population health from personalized health? Just all this content coming in, and we're going to have to not only manage, store, but also access that information. So the roles within the hospital, we're talking about having access, roles with outside the hospital being maybe possibly payers, and then finally and ultimately the patient. How do we get this information back in the hands of the patient to move forward on the initiative of personalized health and personal responsibility? So what do organizations need? They need a way to take this content, store it efficiently, and access it on demand. We're going to discuss how we're going to do that today. The second piece is processes, the process challenges that exist within healthcare. There's manual, unmanaged processes that both exist in the business and the clinical space. For example, major health provider in the U.S., Mayo Clinic, realized they needed to improve their operations with surgical scheduling. One of the first pioneers of using process improvement techniques, including Six Sigma and Baldrige techniques. Still seeing this in their clinic conference on systems engineering and operations. However, process improvement can't just stop in the clinical space. It's a good place to start because it directly affects patient care. But there's other things within the clinical space that now are being looked at as process challenges, including patient throughput, whether that be to real-time location services, waiting room times, asset utilization, equipment cleaning and care coordination, targeted case management, managing that targeted case management across the continuum of care, And there's also business challenges. So those would be managing the revenue cycle, bringing new clinical research through clinical efficiencies up to the front where the care is being provided and delivering it to the end user, contract and vendor management, and provider credentialing. So what organizations need to do is to address these challenges is to discover these processes, design new processes, execute on those processes, and then continue to improve upon their processes as they move forward and measure. The last piece is application challenges. And application challenges is a large category of challenges because it includes everything from business functions to clinical functions to revenue cycle functions. So it's the proprietary and flexible systems that have been built around niche problems that exist in healthcare. So there's access and there's functionality limitations. All of these applications surround the EMR to try to build some of that content in, but they don't always share that information within the EMR space. In addition to that, strategies that hospitals have about going in and acquiring new facilities, building partnerships, developing ACOs, establishing patient-centered medical homes, these initiatives are all going to be things that address applications that come into the system that maybe weren't purchased, but they need to be interoperable with one another to be able to deliver that content at the point of need. So what organizations are looking for there is the ability to eliminate these application silos and deliver this information within the context of the EMR. We don't want physicians and nurses and providers looking and searching for information on patients. We want to deliver them all that information within a common framework. So let's look at how we do that. Let's look at how we create a new reality in healthcare, what we call completing the patient record and bringing these things together. So we have a unified content platform, and this content platform is really bringing together the components of ECM and VNA. And this is the architecture that delivers upon the promise of data liquidity. So what this unified content platform does, it provides a common repository or a common information bus to combine both the non-DICOM content that may come from ECM-type solutions or captured outside of the system. It will be the clinical images that come from either PAC systems or possibly directly from modalities. Store them in a common repository where we can help manage efficiently across the enterprise access, image lifecycle management, and storage architectures. What this also does is it gives us flexibility. So it really separates us from the application layer and separates us from the storage layer to provide true fluidity in determining departmental solutions. So for example, as we move from traditional cardiology and radiology packs moving into new specialty pack spaces where that new content is being generated, we can now do that seamlessly, hook it up to our enterprise content bus, and still maintain our IT consolidation strategy within the storage tier. And both Shannon and Phil are going to talk more in depth about this as we move forward. But this framework also allows a venue to be able to deliver this data liquidity back within the context of the EMR. And that's what we're going to look at next is now that we've established the infrastructure with the unified content platform, let's see how we deliver that through at Perceptive, what we call our content-based medical record. So here would be a physician provider within their EMR system. Could be Epic, Meditech, Cerner. It's just we have a generic your HIS system. We've navigated to a patient. This could be on a patient list, a rounding list, any form or function within the EMR. And what we see on the right-hand side is a notification that there are documents that exist outside the EMR that are directly associated with this patient that will cause impact to their care plan. So what users can do is when they see that notification, they can expand that bar to the content-based medical record and see what types of content those things are that exist out there. So we can see there's admission documents, consent documents, images, photos, and at that point in time they can select and manage a screen to be able to place that information alongside the EMR. So essentially what it's doing is this is what we're talking about. We're talking completing the medical record, bringing all content within the EMR to be able to compare clinical imaging outside of the EMR, clinical documents outside the EMR directly with the discrete data that's within the EMR. And this can all be managed individually, pane by pane, so we can do wound care management with a multi-selection of photos. We can do a combination of documents and photos and clinical images and so on and so forth. Then when the user's done, they can close this piece out, navigate to the next patient, look through their patient record, and then also have the content associated with that, once again running on that toolbar directly in parallel with their workflow. So the great benefit here is it removes that pain of trying to find information for physicians. Now they have it all right at the point of care. So what kind of information can we deliver through this content-based medical record? Well, we're talking about the traditional ECM content, medical records, consents, paper results. We're talking about the next tier up, really that clinical content, radiology, cardiology. It may be even images that are on a CD or DVD that are brought in that are imported. Those can also be available through the EMR. And then finally, that last tier as we move towards the audio and video for patient education, research, and clinical procedures. So with Perceptive Software, we're delivering all content from any source for any purpose in context. So the final piece of our puzzle is really the business process side. How do we go about and solve the process piece? Well, as we see, typically when process optimization projects begin, we go down a Baldrige path, we go down a Six Sigma path or a Lean Sigma path where massive amounts of people and consultants going to come on site and do research into how the processes work, who are the players involved, what do the assets include. Well, within our Perceptive Reflect solution, we're able to take those event logs, bring them into this system, and this system will dynamically build out a workflow diagram with timings to show where bottlenecks can possibly be. So this is an efficient way to, first of all, discover the processes that exist out there. Second of all, then we can go and design a new process based around this information. Third, it allows us to execute, but then finally the last piece is we can keep importing this data on a real-time basis to make sure that we're meeting our metrics for quality or whatever the process improvement project entailed. So it may be something that some patient shows up in an emergent condition in the ER and we want to ensure that they either get a pharmaceutical treatment or some other treatment within a specified amount of time that may be required for quality metrics. It may just be we want to measure throughput for certain conditions throughout the system, or it may be something around a cancer care treatment plan where we're crossing multiple venues and multiple roles and multiple treatments, how we can bring all that data within one process and see that independent of the rest of the organization and figure out how we can optimize that piece. So those are really the three main categories of how we solve the content problems, the process problems, and the application problems. And all of that is built around this innovative technology platform that we have. So that platform consists of four main panels of products. And those products are Perceptive Capture, which allows the capturing of information, as well as OCR and data extraction if we want to do straight-through processing on things such as AP forms or possibly EOBs or other pieces of information that we're processing. There's Perceptive Content. This is where the ECM and VNA live and perform that unified content layer that drives the patient, the content-based medical record. Perceptive Process, that's what we just looked at, how we can discover, design, execute, and improve business processes. And finally, the last piece is the Perceptive Search, which allows that federated search functionality that we saw within the content-based medical record to go about and evaluate what other pieces of content are associated with patient that are clinically relevant to that encounter. We deliver all that information around the Perceptive Interact product, which is that content-based medical record that works side by side with your clinical enterprise applications, which in this case it's your EMR, to help complete that patient record. And that kind of input or overview, I'm going to pass it now to Shannon Werb, our Chief Strategy Officer at Acuo, to discuss more about integrating vendor natural archives and enterprise content management.
Thanks, John. So I want to take a couple of minutes and talk about vendor neutral archiving, define it a bit, take a look at these platform solutions that we're actually delivering. So first of all, let's take a look at some definitions around vendor neutral archiving. So obviously a very common set of acronyms many of you may have heard. The most common being VNA, which is really how the industry is going about defining this bucket that we fit in around primarily managing medical imaging content, but also related non-DICOM content. PACS neutral archiving, or P&A, is a term that's been defined largely by a lead consultant in the industry, Mike Gray. Some people may think it's focused more on the vertical applications clinically, around being neutral to those that are integrated to the VNA, but also another common term you may have heard here when referring to VNA. PACS Enterprise Archiving is another industry term that often refers to a PACS vendor-provided enterprise archive for all imaging content. So think about this as a traditional PACS vendor providing a archive solution, possibly bid as a VNA, for archiving medical imaging across multiple hospitals or maybe multiple independent PACS systems. Archive-neutral PACS, a term introduced by Dr. Paul Chang from the University of Chicago Medical Center around PACS systems that are architected in a way that their archive can be removed from underneath them, i.e. they work well with the VNA. Dell actually coined the term Universal Clinical Archive, UCA. A luminary from UPMC, Dr. Raju Shrestha, he's been chatting about CCF, or more than just medical imaging, or all formats, acronym industry, and VNAs and PACS-provided VNAs. And I really think that this becomes less of a technology challenge put out by SG&A Consulting, Stu Gardner, in 2011, where he digs into some of the differences in the business model between how archive as a VNA and how it may conflict with some of the business models they have in place about their other related products, whereas an independent provided VNA may actually leverage a business model that enables the customer with more ease of change or choice in technology. Often our VNA would be delivered by partners like PACS providers or infrastructure providers, but again, it's a neutral provided solution by an independent Acuo, or now even continuing to be independent under Perceptive Software. So what really is a VNA? This is a definition that I pulled from a report generated by Inmedica in 2012. I like the way this definition derives a number of core attributes around what a vendor-neutral archive is and how it needs to be providing certain capabilities to the customer without getting into really gory details around the technology. Technology is important, but I think the business case for how customers go about this differs, and so the VNA needs to be defined broadly. I've highlighted a number of key terms here, which I think are very important in looking at what the VNA is. A platform for clinical, an enabler, perhaps, an enabler for orchestrating image movement within an institution. So it's really much more than an archive or a final resting place for clinical content. Must be built on an open architecture based on standards with standards-based interfaces, things like DICOM, HL7, XDS. It should really allow the blurriness between where the data is arriving, be it the source or the format of the data. DICOM imaging, perhaps some non-DICOM imaging JPEGs, perhaps a PDF-based report or a text-based report. And then this sort of drives into the next point around the sharing of this data. This is more broad than just moving the data onto a mobile device or getting it to another application in a way that the end users in that application can derive use from it. Or the originating sources then need to become changeable. And what I mean by that, again, going back to this blurriness and data liquidity, if I ingest data from one application, I should be able to consume it in another application easily, like hopefully using standards. So what this really means to us is that the VNA is about interoperability, delivering on this data liquidity concept so the data becomes useful and relevant to each of the stakeholders of the applications or devices they're using to access the data. Okay, so let's take a look at a little bit of the market response to the combination of technologies like VNA and ECM. There's been a number with you today. First is a brief from IMS Research, where they took a look at Lexmark Perceptive Software division acquiring Acuo Technology, and I've highlighted on the right a couple of key points where Inmedica is talking about the fact that they see the combination in allowing the VNAs to drive better cross-enterprise data integration. They see this as a signal towards the trend of enabling more third-party systems to be brought together through what they're referring to as the rise of middleware. They then sort of see this as, okay, VNAs have been changing dramatically over the last number of years. This is a significant shift, so what's next? An article recently published in Rad Informatics driving around the need for interoperability. Again, this is, was written by Jonathan Shoemaker, a consultant at Ascendian, and validation of technology, like side of just radio content, to really complete this patient record. The theme continues then. Raju Shrestha was published in Applied Radiology recently around his article, Guide to Riding the Bandwagon of Enterprise VNAs, and he really drives into how VNAs really aren't created equal. There are many differences. Customers need to think hard about the business requirements for their implementation, and he really feels that enterprise content management firms coming together with VNA as a next logical evolution, as it provides on this strategy for managing all clinical content within the context of the patient or the electronic health record. And finally, Gartner put out a release early after the acquisition was complete in January, where they drive on the right-hand side. You'll see here they're really folding VNA into the concept of ECM and recommending that hospital organizations look at an enterprise-wide information infrastructure for multiple business and clinical applications versus single for each. Further to that, create more of a content ecosystem that puts the data in context, be it the patient, the clinician, the employee, at the center of the data that's being consumed, so I have a more complete picture. Resist installing standalone systems. Start to think about ECM and VNA together. And if you're going through a new acquisition, actually look at them as more of a combined strategy. Finally, by consolidating these repositories and developing exit strategies for applications that manage content on their own. So let's move a little bit into what the Acuo solution looks like. So John earlier had a slide very similar to this that drives around the tsunami of data. And we used to talk a lot about the movement from radiology, cardiology, pathology, non-DICOM content, as John mentioned earlier, movement into genomics or personalized health. There's a significant amount of data that needs to be managed. Largely speaking, I think this challenge isn't as great as it was a number of years ago because we're developing good technology for multiple vendors to manage lots of information. I think really the challenge that we're working on now is how do we move from the PACS era where we really had a single user with a defined workflow, the radiologist in this example, accessing a finite set of the data, to more of a VNA or VNA and ECM era where we're going to provide access to information, more types of information, as well as across more users, different types of applications, ultimately driving towards the patient needing access to the data. So this is really, to us, what's driving this need for data liquidity. We must solve or provide solutions for the unprecedented demand for information. So this slide here, as it draws out, really expands a bit upon the middleware solution that John showed earlier around this unified content platform and focuses a bit more on Acuo's VNA solution, which we refer to as the Universal Clinical Platform. I'm not going to go into this in grave detail, but traditionally VNAs have been focused on the left-hand side around radiology and cardiology. Many of them are integrating to electronic health records. Many of them obviously integrate to the HIS, RIS, or an MPI solution, and many of them will provide good abstraction technology at the bottom around leveraging on-site or multi-data center or cloud-based storage capabilities that the customer may want to provide from an IT perspective. But over the last number of years, VNA technology has really been moving to the right around the rest of this clinical content. So you've seen examples of from John around clinical content that might include medical photography, might include admission forms, scan documentation, may include CD import. So as the ECM vendors have been moving towards content that VNAs traditionally manage, we on the VNA side have been moving in that direction as well. So it's really this area on the right that we feel has been the natural progression of bringing these technologies together in a common footprint with still targeting the delivery of the data through we refer to as Perceptive as a content-based medical form. It's really about providing an abstraction layer for your clinical applications, be it DICOM or non-DICOM, providing intelligence in the middle around replication, compliance, and context-based data management, and providing a storage abstraction layer that allows us to integrate to different types of storage devices to drive data protection, to drive ILM within storage, to drive system application health. So these are really the three focal points within the VNA solution that we offer. Now, we enhance that then by offering an enterprise class integrated system and application health or dashboard delivered across multiple devices to monitor and manage the health of the system. We also enhance that by offering integrated universal viewing technology, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides. But the key is we want to bring DICOM and non-DICOM content from the integrated VNA ECM platform in context of the patient. And you can see a good example of that in the top left where, this example is a hand x-ray with some medical photography around a wound with perhaps a PDF report in the bottom right, all displayed in context of the patient through the electronic health record. We have some other examples here of traditional radiology imaging, maybe an advanced search or ability to get at this data without coming through the electronic health record, and ultimately also full upload, manage, and access of non-DICOM data natively within this solution, delivered across any device, modern technology, cashless, zero footprint. Those sorts of themes are important in delivering this technology to the market. So let's finally take a look then at how we're bringing these solutions together. So the challenge, sort of restating it in a different way here, is how do I take, on the left-hand side, all of this clinical information across different departmental silos, possibly in different storage platforms, with the unstructured content, maybe paper, maybe CDs, maybe SharePoint servers, maybe reporting systems, medical photography on the right-hand side, and really provide that in context to the patient so I'm not missing the information when I'm viewing data in context, as you see the physician at the bottom here. So what we're proposing then is to bring VNA on the left together with ECM on the right in a fashion that we're able to now tie together, as you saw before, all of the clinical content with the ECM content, as well as bringing video capabilities around possibly patient-level video, surgical, research, endoscopy, sleep studies, with maybe even video associated with staff or patient education in a common platform from a data management perspective within a healthcare institution. So the goal here then, the end result is this integrated platform where all content is available in context of the patient or the user you see in the content-based medical record down below. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Phil.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. I'm going to try to walk through kind of what our experience has been with the Acuo archive we deployed approximately 2011. Talk about what were the components that what were the driving issues that caused us to seek out a vendor-neutral archive, and kind of what we think the benefits have been. Okay, there we go. TriRivers Health Partners is a joint venture health IT organization, which is co-sponsored by Swedish American Health System in Rockford, Illinois, and FHN in Freeport, Illinois. We have our own telecommunications network, about 250 miles of private fiber in northern Illinois. We support a lot of fiber initiatives here in this part of the country. And but we're increasingly becoming more of a health service provider or health information system provider organization. We also are implementing a private HIE in northern Illinois as well. A little bit about us. Back around 2011, we were focusing on what we needed to do in terms of our disaster recovery. We were looking at new storage technology at the time, and one of the areas that we had struggled with for actually many years was how to implement a replicated archive for PACS specifically. And we had kind of waited on the PACS vendor to help deliver that to us. We'd actually gone ahead and implemented an archive solution, a replicated archive solution, or at least had tried to implement it from the PACS vendor we had. And every time we went to try to implement that, we were presented with, a lot of additional costs that kept adding into the project. So as we were trying to move more toward this path of improved disaster recovery, we found that what we had to do was, kind of move to a vendor-neutral archive space that allowed us a lot more flexibility in terms of how storage targets were going to be identified or different storage vendors were going to be could be used. And we were at the time working with EMC on the project. EMC had introduced us to Acuo to help support the software piece of that. Currently, we're kind of in this area in terms of our operations and our recovery, where we're doing primary storage and replication. Our Acuo databases that we run are currently 28 miles apart from each other on fiber, and they're replicating all the PACS data from the 2 hospitals we're currently supporting. We actually plan to relocate one of the archives from Freeport, Illinois up into Wisconsin and put that about 200 miles to the north of us, primarily so that we can improve the north-south geographic positioning of our disaster recovery and site recovery solutions. So we're starting to extend in the area of site recovery. We're still a long ways to go. However, when it comes to the PACS storage and the PACS replication, Acuo has provided us with a manageable solution for that for us has worked out very well. So some of our image management pain points, what we were trying to do, obviously, was increase the performance and flexibility of how we manage images, primarily related to PACS at the time, but how do we reduce the total cost of ownership associated with that? And what we were after is a way to take performance in terms of improving the retrieval times, improving how ad hoc queries to the archive data, the PACS data was accessed. We wanted to improve that. In the area of flexibility, what we wanted to do was improve our ability to move images around, make them a lot more highly available, improve our storage and application flexibility, and just improve the sharing challenges. One of the things that we've opted to do now is with Acuo, we're actually moving our enterprise archive or our enterprise viewing software completely off of the PACS vendor, and the image archive, I should say the enterprise viewing software will be directly accessing images, the PACS images from the Acuo software. That way when PACS is down, we can still transfer images into the archive, have those queue up for processing into the PACS system when it comes back up, and then also offer an imaging solution for accessing PACS studies even when the PACS system is not available. So from a cost perspective, it's allowed us to increment our storage better and address the issue of disparate systems and how that storage spread happens. And our migration costs, since we went live, we're actually doing our first PACS migration from the older PACS system to a different PACS system right now, and we literally have no migration costs because we're not moving anything out of the archive. So what we wanted to do within that is we felt we were in a vicious life cycle of the vendor holding our data hostage. So, and I'm talking about the PACS vendor. So moving into the vendor-neutral archive has literally eliminated the migration costs that we would have as we move from PACS vendor to PACS vendor over a period of time. So what we learned was that a true vendor-neutral archive solution centralizes all the medical imaging into one standards-based repository. So before, I think Shannon might have alluded to this in his part of the presentation, you had all these potential islands of information, and if you were working with an image archive vendor that was unique to their particular solutions, you might find that pathology, or in the case certainly cardiology and radiology today, maybe the cardiology system had to have its own archive, and the radiology system had its own archive, and those were kind of captive to those individual platforms. Whereas today, the vendor-neutral archive is in the center with all these various ologies that surround it, and all the data feeds into a central image archive, which is fully replicated, across to a site that allows for disaster recovery, high availability, and all those things that we were after. So our enterprise archive strategy really had to do with this. We really had a radiology and a cardiology PAC system, each having their own proprietary file access to the storage area networks. And so what we wanted to do, and what the archive allowed us to do, is move radiology PACs, cardiology PACs, and components of the EMR to a level that allows the enterprise image archive to exist underneath that. So within that, there are protocols that are provided to us by Acuo that make the access to whoever storage management software we use available. So this could be any vendor down here. Any of these could be any kind of storage target that we need, and we can create that pretty easily on the fly, just on the demand as we need it. So as you can see, as we're adding a future PACs here now, and as we do that, the radiology PACs we have goes away. So some of our challenges and obstacles, obviously, these islands and silos of data without any instant access and discovery, no way to get to that data around the PAC system if the PAC system had difficulties in operation. Retention and purging is really not available. We're still not finding many sites that are purging, but with Acuo, we've actually talked about a best practice case where we can take a very low, essentially create a purge routine along, or I should say create a separate archive for PACs on a storage volume, which would be our least expensive storage volume. And then when we purged from the active archive, we actually purge that to a secondary archive, which we would call our wastebasket archive. And maybe we keep the wastebasket archive for 2 or 3 years. And then at the end of the 2 or 3 year period, maybe that's when it fully gets purged from the system. So we're starting to have retention and purge discussions, but an Acuo allows us to make those kind of decisions, whereas with vendors, the PACS vendors, it was always not available. It was very difficult to address. We're working on ways to establish access into the archive of our health information exchange we use, and so we're trying to determine where does Acuo pick that exchange up for archive storage purposes, and where does the other components of the exchange, like CCD document exchange, occur. It helped us address the data explosion going on in terms of facilitating a platform that we could grow and support. And again, this whole issue of data migration, this constant migrating from PACS vendor to PACS vendor, every time a storage target change occurs or every time a PACS vendor change occurs, that's just not had to happen since the acquisition of Acuo. So we have reduced our future archive costs. We actually did that. We've done that with we're actually doing a migration now from one vendor to another. We've recovered about 2/3 of the costs of the Acuo system just through this one single migration, because we haven't had to do that. So it allows us to leverage any infrastructure we have and move to this vendor-neutral strategy on the archive, standardize that, address the retention, purge, compression components, and a whole lot of other goals that we've been able to actually achieve as a result of the migration away from PACS for their archive into a vendor-neutral archive solution. And here's a real-world example of how we're addressing where the VNA can improve our organizational infrastructure workflow. So today we're currently having discussions, and this isn't settled yet, but we're currently able, because of the VNA, to demand how the organizational infrastructure workflow needs to work. So in this case, we're converting off of merge PACs and contemplating a merge to DR system PACs. And you can see the radiology modalities will forward their studies into Acuo into a temporary archive that can be created quickly, easily on the fly. And this might be this could be a 12-day, 15-day, 20-day archive, after which Acuo functions as a router to function the PACS image onto a set of load balancers that use a set of DICOM transfer devices to get to eventually into the image server, where that image is served up to the radiologist. Once the image is marked red, the PACS system will then output the final image into the Acuo archive, where it'll be hosted permanently for us. All of this, of course, is available from a viewer that exists for image access directly from our EMRs or from a web interface that is available directly into the archive. So any of this can be down over here, and this is all still readily available to us within the archive solution that we have. So there's some business values propositions that are important, we think. Obviously, the open systems architecture solution allows us to never migrate things again, and every time we make a PACS change, every time we make a PACS change, we're getting a return on investment every single time that happens, because we're avoiding that migration that always had to happen between proprietary PACS solutions. The high availability piece was very important to our organization. So the ability to access PACS even in the event of PACS downtime from either of the replicated archives that exist across 2 sites, that's always available to us. So even if one of the Acuo archives is down, we can still process images, we can still view imaging from the replicated archive that is still up. We literally have to have a failure of both archives and both PACS systems to be able to not access images. And then certainly we want to be nimble, want to grow and change the business, so VNAs offer that. It's a future-proof business value proposition for us. Works well with our XDS HIE components that we have that we're trying to implement. From an operational perspective, the open source solution is much more scalable in the enterprise, standardized. It really has enabled this enterprise managed storage vision that allows us to access images anytime, pretty much anytime, anywhere. And it's very much standards-based, which is something we like. And from the clinical value proposition, again, the open source solution, it does allow clinicians to choose a different kind of viewing tool. So we can have any number of viewing tools depending on what solution is required by what ology out there. The orthopedic, for instance, the oncology physicians might have a different viewing tool that they need versus the radiologist that may have yet another different viewing tool. The component of being able to offer enterprise imaging and link that to the EMR so that the enterprise imaging study can be launched directly from the EMR and essentially streamed to the desktop was something we've been waiting for a long time. One of our big problems with some of the imaging tools we had is, if you had a CT study out there with 300 images on it, you might have to wait for all 300 images to load before you could cine loop some of those things. And so the nice thing about the enterprise imaging solution and being able to find a good pick is the enterprise imaging solution we chose is actually one that streams data to the desktop like YouTube streams data. So as soon as those first few images are received, the image, any image cine loops and things like that are starting to play on the desktop. So with that, I guess we'd entertain any questions, right, guys?
Yes, Phil, great. Thank you so much. Let's take a look through our question list here and see where we can get started. All right, the first question is for, I believe, Shannon. How are you integrating the Acuo and Perceptive platforms, proprietary or standards-based?
Thanks, John. That's a good question. So we didn't get into a significant number of details of how the integration is actually going to be achieved, but at Perceptive and Acuo, we both believe strongly in standards-based infrastructure. We've also both been investing heavily in XDS initiatives. Perceptive, obviously, in the ECM space, has been spending a lot of time in the XDS acquisition or capture capabilities, be it around scan documentation, be it around CDs, XDM as an example. On the Acuo, as well as being an XDS source. On the Acuo side, clearly it's been a drive towards the repository and registry and being a complete VNA to make sure that we can house and manage all clinical content. So there's clearly an initiative to build an integration based off of XDS that'll be readily and quickly available in the market. On top of that, though, there's also a significant amount of content that I like to describe as leveraging the rich capabilities of ECM. A simple example, bring in a form or generate an e-form that's filled out. It has some workflow associated with it, so it's routed perhaps for an approval or a signature. It might then be routed and have that form annotated in a fashion not dissimilar from how you'd annotate a PACS image. This rich ECM function, this may actually be occurring on financial records. Those financial records may or may not be needed inside of an XDS-based infrastructure. And so we're definitely planning to build out an infrastructure that leverages the same common repository approach such that rich ECM content can leverage what Acuo has been doing around storage abstraction, NAS, SAN, cloud-based infrastructure, as well as XDS associated with making the relevant information available at the patient level. So clearly we're moving towards standards-based integration, and then we're providing rich single repository capabilities for traditional ECM content.
Great, thank you. Let's see what our next question is. When are we going to see this integrated platform?
Oh, it's a good extension from the previous question. Our focus is to make sure that we're providing incremental improvements and releases to the market as quickly and often as possible. So there's clearly a goal in place that we're driving towards delivery of. As an example, standards-based XDS integration is something that we can achieve rapidly, and so you'll see products coming out from Perceptive that bring these platforms together through XDS very rapidly, clearly this year. Longer term, this integrated long-term vision and platform around leveraging common-based infrastructure is something that will come after, but there will be continuous incremental improvements on a quarter-by-quarter basis. So we won't be waiting for a long time before we see them integrated.
Thank you. All right. How will this venture impact meaningful use, HIPAA requirements, any standards in the industry?
So Phil, maybe I'll provide some thoughts there and then turn that over to you to get your perspective on how you see bringing these together, assisting with meaningful use, since clearly this is something that you're working on at your institution. So at Perceptive and Acuo, we really feel that although we don't directly impact or provide a meaningful use solution, let's say a solution that is the government is providing incentives around how we're achieving meaningful use, we're really a foundational play where we provide influence for data being made available through the electronic health record to clinicians, physicians, the patient, in context of what's being viewed in the electronic health record. So it's not a direct or final solution. The electronic health record is really the, if you want to call it the portal, the access point, the legal record of the patient information. We're really an enabler of driving additional clinical content through the EHR. Phil, any thoughts you'd like to add?
I really can't add to that too much in that certainly there might be some XDS-related functionality here that could help a site use this technology as a way to access records from a connected HIE solution. So this could be a way where a CCD could be accessed and consumed as part of an end user hospital's solution to participate within an XDS-based standards-based HIE solution. So certainly that would be, I think, that's probably the biggest impact of this, because you might have, in this case of some of us, Obviously, if you're on Epic or if you're on Meditech or some of the other platforms, some of those vendors have solutions for that. However, as we've implemented CCD connectivity across 4 different EMR platforms, we find that some of the vendors may not be ready for some of that, and so maybe having a solution out there that offers an alternative to that might be something we might end up having to pursue.
Great, thanks, Phil. I think the only thing else that I would add to that, I know with the recent communication that the HIPAA regulations are getting a little bit more stringent about assuming guilt before with lost information. It's really all about the interconnectability and the management of content, whether it be within the EMR, external to EMR, all based around the business rules and the rules of the organization. And the more tightly we can align those, how we manage the content with how the business needs to manage them versus based upon the limitations of the technology that is chosen, gives us that much more freedom and flexibility to meet those standards and the upcoming standards in the future. And unfortunately, I'm getting notification that that is the last question that we can take. Also, just want to let everybody know that this session has been recorded. It will be made available after a certain amount of time. I know we need to put it together and package it and bring it all into one deliverable. So, but it will be available on our website. We will reach out to the people that have attended the show or the webinar, as well as those that have registered, and let them know the location and availability of this when it comes out.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.